27-year-old Angela Lucas claims that on the 12th of November 2023, her son Diego slipped on the stairs and accidentally fell on a knife. However, experts immediately doubt this version. The angle of knife penetration, according to the forensic conclusion, categorically does not correspond to the claimed fall. Soon, details discovered by the investigation in the apartment completely contradict Angela's initial statement. The 12th of November, 2023. Brazil, São Paulo, Elite Residential Complex, Jardins Mondego, 12:19. Security cameras record Angela Lucas, 27 years old, exiting the elevator with her son Diego, 7 years old, unconscious in her arms. She looks confident but confused, typical behavior of a person in shock. The first word she spoke to the security guard, he slipped on the stairs, accidentally fell on a knife. The complex staff's reaction is standard, a call to emergency services. The team arrives in 8 minutes. Paramedics quickly examine Diego. Resuscitation is impossible. Medics immediately note Angela's condition. Moderate shock, hands shaking, gaze frozen. Operatives arrive an hour later. They don't trust the first version. According to protocol, a primary examination of the scene is mandatory. They go up to the 5th floor, apartment 502. The Lucas family had been living there for about a year. The scene clearly doesn't correspond to an accident scenario. In the kitchen sink lies a knife. Kitchen Tramontina, a brand typical for Brazil. The stamp is carefully erased. Why? Traces of detergent, an attempt at hasty washing, but there's no blood. This already alarms investigators. In the garbage bin, they find a plastic container from traditional Brazilian snacks, pastéis de bacalhau. On the lid are obvious bloodstains. Fingerprints only of Angela and Diego. The container clearly doesn't fit into the initial version of events. What was it doing near the supposed fall location? Key detail. The father, Ricardo Lucas, leaves the house parking at 12:07. This is confirmed by surveillance cameras. The car, a BMW X5, noticeable, new, exits confidently and quickly. Ricardo was clearly in a hurry. Perhaps he didn't know about what was happening. Or conversely, he hurried to leave the scene. Investigators immediately work on neighbor Donna Esther's statement. The woman claims she heard a scream from neighboring apartment 503, where loud music often plays. The check lasts 2 hours. Police confirm that the neighboring apartment was empty at the time of the tragedy. Music was playing through a speaker with an automatic timer. The scream heard by Esther probably belonged to Angela, not the neighbors. A false lead. After 12 hours comes the preliminary autopsy result. The expert conclusion clearly and dryly states blade penetration angle 37 degrees, penetration depth 9 centimeters. The professional conclusion of forensic doctors is unequivocal. This was an active hand strike, not an accidental fall. The accident that Angela referred to is categorically excluded. The psychological examination of Angela Lucas was conducted on the 15th of January 2024, 2 months after the incident at the Jardins Mondego complex. During this time, the investigation focused on understanding her condition and motives. The psychiatrist's report reveals a new facet. Angela suffered from prolonged postpartum depression. The illness was hidden. No one in the family or among friends suspected how deeply she had plunged into her own problems. Experts discover evidence that Angela was taking antidepressants without prescription, not notifying her attending physician about this. The state of depression, however, does not automatically become a defense or justification. Experts explain. Depression is a factor affecting behavior but does not exclude responsibility for conscious actions. Details of Angela's financial situation add context. Important information appears in banking reports. An SMS receipt from a Portuguese online pharmacy confirms the purchase of antidepressants. The payment amount is €38. This is quite a real procedure for Portugal at the end of 2023. A microcredit debt of about €900 is also revealed. Investigation analysts confirm transactions using banking APIs. Psychiatrists explain that financial problems combined with emotional instability create favorable conditions for impulsive acts. This is not necessarily an intention to harm, but the risk increases. Angela Lucas's lawyer states a defense line based on a state of affect. The examination partially confirms the impulsiveness and spontaneity of the suspect's behavior in stressful situations. However, in their opinion, in this case, no signs of complete loss of control were identified. Angela claims she practically doesn't remember details of that day, describing events with general phrases and vague memories. Her accounts vary from "just fell" to "I didn't have time to understand anything." Psychologists note here not amnesia, but a typical protective mechanism of the psyche during acute emotional crisis. The prosecutor, analyzing the conclusions, hints that the pills could have caused confusion. The investigation actively works on the version of unintentional actions under the influence of medications. But so far, this is only an assumption without final confirmation. The prosecutor's version about complete absence of intent due to antidepressants is checked by experts. However, psychiatrists quickly reject complete loss of control due to medications. The drug detected in Angela's tests does not lead to deep consciousness disorders and does not make a person insane. They emphasize that taking antidepressants can soften emotional reactions, but cannot completely erase awareness of what's happening. This prosecutor's assumption is ultimately recognized as a false lead and closed. At the same time, investigators receive a forensic report on the knife. Conclusion: blood was discovered inside the knife handle, hidden by a careful attempt to wash it off. This indicates conscious action. Someone wanted the traces to disappear, not just accidental rinsing. Experts are certain such a cleaning method requires full control of actions, sustained intention, and time. This completely contradicts the version about impulsive loss of control, strengthening the investigation's doubts about Angela Lucas's words. On the 13th of November, investigators reconstruct the digital correspondence of spouses Ricardo and Angela Lucas. WhatsApp provides complete message history for the week before the incident, and there they discover not just tense conversations. This is a full-fledged exchange of mutual accusations. This correspondence forces a different look at family relations and the tension in which the Lucas family lived in recent months. In the messages, neither Angela nor Ricardo try to restrain their words. This is open confrontation in which extreme despair and fatigue can be felt. It's precisely from these messages that investigators try to extract clues to what happened. One of the key moments becomes a voice message from Ricardo, sent on the evening of the 9th of November. "I'm tired of paying for everything. Enough croissants and credits." Investigators record precisely this comment, as it directly connects with the financial tension in the family identified earlier. This message completely coincides with discovered banking transactions. Ricardo's card statement shows that on the evening of the 11th of November, he indeed bought a container of traditional Portuguese snacks pastéis de bacalhau at a local supermarket. This is the very container found later with blood traces. Now the investigation has a question. Was this a gift or another reason for conflict? While there is no definitive answer yet, the fact remains. Ricardo purchases food that he mentions in correspondence in the context of financial dissatisfaction. Despite obvious facts, Ricardo Lucas has a solid alibi. He was absent from the apartment, and this is confirmed by surveillance cameras in the parking lot. He left the territory at 12:07, 12 minutes before the recorded event. However, the investigation does not exclude the emotional motive that could have influenced the development of events. From the messages, it is clear. Ricardo was preparing to break off the relationship. Emotional distance, financial claims, and fatigue from debts. All this describes the background against which the tragedy could have developed. During interrogation, Ricardo repeats that he did not know about Angela's intentions, and that there was no point for him to stage anything. Nevertheless, the investigation does not close the question of Ricardo's possible involvement or influence on what happened through Angela. In the course of discussing motives and scenarios, the investigator cautiously suggests, could Ricardo have agreed with Angela to stage an accident in order to receive a large insurance payout? The version is not absurd. Angela was experiencing financial difficulties, and Ricardo clearly expressed fatigue from endless debts. A possible conspiracy aimed at solving financial problems is not yet confirmed. There is no direct evidence, and Ricardo categorically denies such a version. However, the investigation still retains this option as a working scenario, although confidence in it is extremely low. The investigation simultaneously studies details of Ricardo's movements on the day of the tragedy. One detail attracts their special attention. In the case materials, there appears to be a recording from the GPS device of Ricardo's truck, which recorded strange behavior of the machine exactly at 12:19. At exactly this time, according to cameras, Angela appears in the elevator with Diego in her arms. Ricardo's truck sharply increases speed, as if he is hastily leaving some place or reacting to an urgent call. What could have forced him to accelerate so suddenly? Details of the call have not yet been revealed. The investigation decides to check whether these two facts are connected: the call and the tragedy in the apartment. This detail again forces them to reconsider Ricardo's alibi and his possible role. The 30th of November, almost 3 weeks after the tragedy in the residential complex Jardins Mondego, a technical employee of the cloud storage provider responsible for video surveillance makes an unexpected discovery. The recording from the elevator camera at the critical moment, at 12:19 on the day of the incident, turns out to be cut by exactly 4 seconds. This does not look like a standard malfunction. The technician immediately notifies the investigation, and the digital experts team restores a backup copy from external storage. The recording, previously considered complete and undamaged, now shows a completely different picture of what happened. In the restored video, the most important moment is noticeable. Angela Lucas first exits the elevator alone. She takes a step forward, as if she forgot something, or is not sure of her actions. After exactly 4 seconds, she appears in the frame again, now with Diego in her arms, showing no signs of consciousness. These 4 seconds completely destroy Angela's initial version that everything happened on the stairs. The stair landing is not visible in the frame, but now it is clear. Something serious happened before the mother entered the elevator. Investigators immediately summon Angela for additional interrogation. The investigation's questions are extremely precise and clearly formulated. Why did she first exit alone? Where exactly was Diego during these 4 seconds when Angela was absent from the elevator? Angela's answers become even more uncertain. She was clearly not prepared for such a discovery. Now the investigation no longer believes the main version of events, the fall on the stairs. Instead, a new picture begins to form. The investigation is confident. Something happened exactly on the floor, not on the stairs. Angela Lucas is still unable to provide an explanation for this temporal gap in her story. However, a young concierge working in the complex recently gives an alternative explanation. He claims that the surveillance system in the elevator has repeatedly demonstrated malfunctions. According to him, short video clips have occurred repeatedly. The concierge assures that manipulation is excluded and insists that these 4 seconds could simply have dropped out for technical reasons. This version forces investigators to briefly turn aside to check technical malfunctions. Experts carefully check logs and equipment condition. However, they find no confirmations of regular malfunctions of exactly this type. This version of technical malfunction begins to weaken, although it is not definitively closed. Simultaneously, the engineers team checks the elevator's technical log, which leads to a completely unexpected discovery. It turns out that at 12:18:55, the elevator's maintenance mode was activated. Someone manually switched the elevator mechanism to the special service mode. According to the complex's internal instructions, only a technician with the appropriate key or a person who has such a key can do this. At the moment of the tragedy, the elevator was clearly used without standard resident access. This shifts suspicion to Diego's father, Ricardo Lucas. Investigators know that among Ricardo's tools, working with cargo vehicles, there are keys and technical devices capable of activating such modes. Now there appears the possibility that the father could still control the situation remotely or had prepared conditions for staging an accident in advance. Information about the key is not yet complete, and the investigation does not reveal details of its universality. For now, the version of Ricardo's possible involvement again becomes a working theory. Also at this stage, the investigation finally closes doubts regarding neighbor Donna Esther's testimony. It was she who earlier reported the scream she heard around 12:18. Now, thanks to the elevator's technical data, the time of the scream is confirmed absolutely precisely. Now the investigation is convinced. The scream heard by Esther belonged exactly to Angela, and this happened literally seconds before the camera recorded her appearance in the elevator. The 20th of April, 2024. The courtroom in São Paulo is overcrowded. Journalists and observers carefully follow every word of the judge, every movement of the prosecutor. Angela Lucas sits motionless, her gaze directed forward, not a single sign of excitement. The judge begins to read the final conclusion of the investigation and the court decision. He carefully reconstructs the chronology of events of that fateful day. The investigation confirmed the complete picture of what happened. On the 12th of November 2023, at 12:18, a quarrel arises between Angela and Diego, caused by another financial complaint, and the pastel de bacalhau purchased the day before. Angela, in a state of emotional breakdown, loses control and delivers a single fatal blow with a Tramontina kitchen knife. Confirmation is provided by blood remains on the container from the snacks. What previously caused bewilderment now becomes key evidence. At 12:18:55, Angela consciously activates the elevator maintenance mode to disguise the true picture of the incident as an accident. She quickly descends alone, evaluates the stairwell, and makes a decision about falsifying the event. These 4 seconds of absence from the video recording were carefully hidden by editing, but the backup copy from external storage allowed complete restoration of the authentic course of events. Forensic medical experts from 3 independent institutes confirmed categorically the knife penetration angle of 37 degrees in no way corresponds to the version of accidental fall. This was a conscious and controlled blow with the hand from top to bottom, absolutely excluding any explanation about falling on a knife. Trace experts who examined the knife confirmed steel microparticles from the handle completely match those that were found in the wound channel. This confirms the only version, a blow with precisely this knife. Technical specialists who studied the backup storage of video recordings categorically rejected the assumption of technical malfunction put forward by the young concierge. The recording was consciously and intentionally cut, which excludes the version of accidental error. The GPS tracker of Ricardo Lucas's car shows his movement with absolute precision. By 12:19, the father was already at a distance of 17 kilometers from the house on the A1 highway. Thus, the version of his possible participation is completely excluded. Angela's lawyer in the final speech asks the court to consider the defendant's condition, stating that the blow was struck in a state of affect, and demands reclassification of the case to grievous bodily harm. However, the prosecutor responds sharply and confidently. He demonstrates to the court the Tramontina knife with washed blood on the handle, emphasizing that these actions of Angela are not simply emotional, they are intentional and conscious. This becomes the key argument of the prosecution. The silence in the hall is absolute. The judge announces a recess to make the final decision. No one leaves. Everyone waits. After half an hour, the judge returns and announces the verdict. Angela Lucas is found guilty of committing a crime qualified as intentional infliction of harm that resulted in irreversible consequences. The sentence is 14 years, of imprisonment. Angela does not react. Neither relief nor despair, no external manifestation of feelings. Her face is absolutely motionless, her gaze glassy. She quietly stands up following the escort and leaves the courtroom. Journalists begin collecting equipment. Cameras are turned off. Cold and absolute silence sets in. The trial is completed. The finale is dry and clear, like the entire story, without the slightest attempt to give it an emotional tone. Carla Rios, a 38-year-old resident of Puerto Varas, disappeared without a trace on the night of November 11th to 12th from her own home. Carla's husband, Thomas Ruiz, assured police that she had simply gone to visit a friend in neighboring Puerto Montt. However, facts pointed to something else. Carla never visited the bus station, and surveillance cameras recorded a heated argument between the spouses on the evening before the disappearance. On the night of November 11th to 12th, 2023, in the city of Puerto Varas in southern Chile, an event occurred that initially seemed like a trivial family quarrel. 38-year-old Carla Rios left her house on Colón Street 137, and her spouse Thomas Ruiz claimed that she had gone to visit a friend in Puerto Montt. He spoke about this calmly and confidently, but something clearly didn't match the simple facts. When police decided to check Carla's route, at the Terminal de Buses Sur bus station, it turned out that none of the employees had seen the woman that night. Bus tickets also weren't purchased, and this already indicated something else. The couple's house is equipped with a modern video surveillance system. These cameras recorded how on the evening of November 11th at 22:30, Carla and Thomas argued quite loudly. What exactly the conversation was about, the cameras didn't capture. The sound was muffled. Nevertheless, both their body language spoke of the seriousness of the conflict. The next day in the morning, Thomas prepared lunch for his relatives. Pork soup, a dish that seemed ordinary but for some reason caused anxiety for the investigation, considering the circumstances of Carla's nighttime disappearance. The financial aspect of the case was even stranger. On the morning of November 12th, exactly 800,000 Chilean pesos were withdrawn from Carla's account. The card belonged to Carla herself. The PIN code was entered correctly, which means someone clearly knew her personal password for account access. Police immediately noted this as a key lead, but so far without comments about how exactly this code was learned. Police initially had two directions of suspicion. First, under obvious attention, came Thomas Ruiz, the missing woman's spouse. His behavior was outwardly ordinary, however, the absence of traces of Carla's trip and unexpected financial transactions inevitably made him the main suspect. At the same time, no direct accusations were presented to him yet. Police worked strictly within Chilean laws, having only indirect evidence. The second suspect was neighbor Armando Flowers, who told police that the family was in difficult financial circumstances. He claimed that the spouses owed a significant sum. However, real financial reports weren't yet available to police, and the neighbor's assertion remained at the level of rumors. During the first 24 hours after the disappearance, neighbor Armando Flowers actively spread a rather shocking version of events. He directly told police that Thomas supposedly decided to sell Carla's internal organs to cover accumulated debts. This version sounded loud and frightening. However, the investigation, finding no confirmations, treated it with extreme caution and skepticism. There was no data about the spouse's connection with criminal structures, and the neighbor was perceived rather as a person capable of greatly exaggerating. The morning of November 15th turned out rainy and cool, 13 degrees Celsius with high humidity. The weather significantly slowed the work of forensic experts in the yard of Rios and Ruiz's house. After several hours of persistent examination and numerous checks, the Carabineros unexpectedly made the first substantial discovery. In a garbage container next to the house, a small bone was found. Preliminary DNA analyses immediately gave results. The bone belonged to a human, and genetic matching with Carla Rios was practically 100%. However, police immediately took an officially restrained position. Experts had not yet reported which exact part of the body the find belonged to and under what circumstances it could have ended up in the container. The press had already begun discussing this find, but police refused to give any details, not wanting to allow hasty conclusions. The discovery of the bone meant that the case was moving in a completely different direction. It was no longer possible to ignore the fact that Carla's disappearance was not simply leaving home after a family quarrel. Now it was obvious. The events of the night of November 11th to 12th were not a simple flight to a friend and not an accident. The investigation had closely approached a new stage, at which it would be necessary to understand what exactly really happened that night. The investigative team continued actively studying Thomas Ruiz's strange financial behavior. ATM cameras confirmed. The money withdrawn from Carla's account was obtained exactly at 3:10 in the morning. Already after, according to Thomas himself, Carla had left the house. Examination of the bank terminal revealed Thomas's fingerprints, and one detail particularly interested forensic experts. The clearest fingerprint remained on the key with the number 4. It was precisely this detail that gave police grounds to assume that Carla's spouse exactly knew her PIN code, but so far official conclusions were restrained. Additional evidence appeared thanks to a technical device in the couple's house, a smart speaker with a sound recording function. The speaker accidentally activated precisely at the moment of conflict. At 22:33 on the evening of November 11th, Carla's voice distinctly cried out, "Swelter me! Let me go." This perfectly matched in time with the video recording of the quarrel obtained from surveillance cameras, and put Thomas in the position of a person who had something to hide. During interrogation, Thomas Ruiz behaved confidently, although obviously tensed from the investigators' questions. To the question about why he withdrew money from Carla's account, the man answered simply, "The card was in the common drawer in the hallway. Anyone could take it and go to the ATM. Why do you immediately think of me?" But the investigator was interested in another moment. At 3 o'clock in the morning, when the money was withdrawn, Thomas's mobile phone turned out to be at home and stably connected to the LTE network. However, the man himself completely disappeared from the coverage area at that time. The investigator asked directly, "Why was your phone at home, and you yourself left the area at 3 in the morning?" Thomas answered briefly and firmly, "I went for coffee to the gas station. At this time of night, there's usually no one. I wanted to think quietly." This version of Thomas's was carefully checked. Police received confirmation from cameras at the local gas station that Thomas really did come there around 0:10, approximately an hour and a half after the recorded conflict. The distance from home to the gas station was 7 kilometers. Thomas reached it in 12 minutes in his pickup truck. At the station, he bought coffee, a receipt was recorded, and his stay there looked natural and plausible. This fact significantly removed suspicions from Thomas regarding movement in the early night hours. But it in no way explained the money withdrawal at 3:10 in the morning. The investigation unexpectedly received important confirmation from forensic medical experts. The bone found earlier was officially identified. It was a finger phalanx of Carla Rios. Confirmation of belonging to Carla caused an obvious reaction in Thomas. During the next conversation with the investigator, the man noticeably paled, however then, unexpectedly for everyone, smiled slightly and said, "I clearly said, I took her to the bus. What happened next, I don't know." This statement caused awkward silence in the room. The investigator recorded Thomas's words and officially documented his reaction, noting that in the suspect's behavior there was inconsistency between words and facial expressions. In light of new circumstances, the investigation decided to study more closely the life of Carla Rios herself. If Thomas's version had at least partial truthfulness, it was necessary to understand whether Carla could have disappeared of her own will without pressure from her husband. At this stage, police decided for the first time to push Thomas to the background, concentrating on the personality of the missing woman and her possible hidden problems and conflicts. The investigation gradually changed direction. Instead of closely watching Thomas, the police began to study the life of Carla Rios herself more deeply. And almost immediately, important information was discovered in her phone. In a protected messenger with two-factor authentication, they found her correspondence with a family law attorney. This was not a casual consultation, but a lengthy, carefully planned legal strategy for divorce. Messages sent at different times over the last 2 months indicated that Carla was serious and was not planning to inform Thomas about this step in advance. The detail that particularly interested the police concerned finances. It turned out that a separate account had been opened at Banco Estado for several weeks, registered exclusively in Carla's name. She transferred small amounts to it, clearly preparing for property division. According to bank data, Carla consulted on how to maximally protect her money so it would not be accessible to her spouse. Police immediately noted. Thomas clearly knew nothing about this account, which confirmed suspicions about hidden tensions in their relationship. When investigators spoke with close relatives, it became clear why Carla was hiding her plans. Her grandmother, Maria, 62 years old, a relative with active status, frankly admitted Carla was afraid for the house. She said if Thomas found out ahead of time, he would do everything to not give her anything. They hadn't been happy for a long time, but she wanted to do everything right. Carla's lawyer added a new important detail that directly contradicted the calm version voiced by Thomas. He provided police with a draft lawsuit that was being prepared for court filing. The document clearly outlined Carla's demands for property division and, most importantly, mentioned numerous conflicts that spouse Thomas denied in every way. This completely contradicted his words that everything in the family was calm and without conflicts. The investigation also paid attention to Carla's closest friend, Lucia. Lucia lived nearby and was closely connected to the family. When police tried to obtain her testimony, it turned out that Lucia had been absent for 3 days. Neighbors reported that the woman had gone to Puerto Montt, allegedly on personal business. Her disappearance raised questions, and police developed a version that Lucia might have helped Carla secretly leave the city. At the moment, this lead looked plausible, but there were no direct confirmations yet, and Lucia remained on the list of persons for questioning at the first opportunity. A new turn arose on the 20th of November when police requested additional video materials from Highway RP 225, which runs east from Puerto Varas toward the forest area La Parva. Road surveillance cameras at 5:12 in the morning on the 12th of November recorded Thomas Ruiz's pickup. This discovery itself was unexpected. Thomas always claimed that he was taking his wife to the bus station located in the south, in the direction of Puerto Montt. But the car was clearly moving in the completely opposite direction. The recordings clearly show the pickup was moving slowly but confidently toward the forest. The driver was not speeding, not attracting attention, and at the same time clearly knew where he was going. Investigators noted a strange circumstance. The time of the pickup's recording did not coincide with Thomas's statement that he was at the gas station. This fact immediately raised serious questions about his alibi. Now the focus of the investigation shifted dramatically. What began as a family drama and possible domestic conflict sharply acquired a different tone. Police had to carefully study Thomas's route, understand what exactly he was transporting in the pickup, and why he was heading specifically to the forest area. The investigative team decided to immediately begin examining the forest territory La Parva, which was now the central place of interest for the entire investigation. Police thoroughly examined the territory of the forest area, La Parva. What is inside the plastic bags? Forensic experts worked carefully and without haste. In the forest, La Parva, 15 kilometers from the city, 4 dense plastic bags were found, carefully hidden under a thick layer of wet leaves and branches. The weight of each bag was about 10 kilograms, 40 total. The bags immediately caused alarm, heavy, carefully tied with a clearly non-randomly chosen place for concealment. During the first examination of the bags on site, forensic experts found inside a strange mixture: bone fragments, traces of soot and fine metal shavings. The metal shavings immediately reminded experts of specific residues from garage work. Exactly such fine cutting usually remains after using an angle grinder or metal saw. But the main thing was expected later: the results of laboratory DNA research. Experts worked according to the protocol approved in 2023. Within 48 hours, the bones belonging specifically to Carla Rios was completely confirmed. This was a turning point in the investigation, the moment when the disappearance officially stopped being simply a disappearance. After discovering the bags, investigators again questioned the neighbors. Armando Flowers, a neighbor, again stated that he saw Thomas's pickup on the night of the 12th of November. "I clearly saw Thomas's car around 5:30 in the morning. He was driving fast, hurrying. I definitely remembered his pickup." Thomas responded to these statements calmly but sharply. "Armando is deliberately lying. He owes me money, trying to distract your attention from himself." At first, Armando's words looked suspicious. Police, suspecting him of possible complicity, decided to check his alibi. Armando insisted that on the night of the 12th of November, he was far from Puerto Varas, at a gas station 120 kilometers to the north. The investigation thoroughly studied surveillance cameras at the gas station, checked receipts and records from the payment terminal. The evidence was irrefutable. Armando was indeed at the gas station at the indicated time. The lead was completely closed, and his mobile phone was returned to him. Armando was no longer considered as a possible accomplice. Meanwhile, investigators obtained an official warrant to search the garage of the house at Calle Colón, 137, belonging to the Ruiz family. This garage had long attracted police attention. The floor in the room was covered with fresh concrete screed, which immediately seemed suspicious. During careful examination, forensic experts discovered thin cracks and noticeable traces of repair. Soon after beginning work, they found what became the most important evidence. In the concrete cracks, Carla Rios' blood was discovered. This discovery immediately made useless all of Thomas's attempts to explain his movements that night. The find confirmed the investigation's suspicions. Thomas was trying to hide traces of an event that occurred in the garage. That same day, Thomas was called for another interrogation, where upon learning about the examination results, he lost control of himself for the first time, nervously turning away from investigators. Now the investigation understood. They had in their hands not just a family conflict and a person's disappearance. This was a premeditated crime, the details of which Thomas was carefully hiding. Questions no longer revolved around Carla's motives, her possible escape, or help from friends. Now police focused on reconstructing the very night from the 11th to the 12th of November. Thomas had to account for every minute of that time. Forensic experts began gathering the complete picture of what happened between 22:30 in the evening of the 11th of November and 5 o'clock in the morning of the 12th of November, the period in which the mystery of Carla's disappearance and Thomas's subsequent actions unfolded. The Court of First Instance in the city of Puerto Montt officially announced the verdict. Thomas Ruiz was found guilty of the intentional murder of his wife, Carla Rios. The established motive for the crime was the desire to maintain control over family property and avoid divorce proceedings that Carla had been carefully preparing. The court session, lasting more than 2 months, came to its finale in March 2025. The prosecution, having carefully reconstructed the complete chronology of the night of the 11th to 12th of November 2023, presented in detail the entire sequence of Thomas Ruiz's actions. On the 11th of November, exactly at 22:30, surveillance cameras record an emotional conflict between the spouses in the kitchen. This episode is also confirmed by recording from the home smart speaker. It was then that Carla loudly shouted, "Let me go." Zrenia, which became the beginning of the chain of tragic events. Between 23 hours and midnight, Thomas commits the attack, after which Carla becomes unconscious. The investigation clearly records the moment of transferring Carla to the garage. It was then that Ruiz attempts to create an alibi, going to the gas station for coffee at 0 hours, 10 minutes. The recording on the gas station camera proves important, but the investigation quickly establishes this was a brief and intentional trip aimed at confusing traces and creating an appearance of innocence. From 0 hours 30 to 3 hours in the garage, Thomas carries out dismemberment. The court avoids public details due to their serious nature, limiting itself only to a dry mention that traces of these actions were completely confirmed by examination. Special attention was paid to blood traces found in the concrete floor that had soaked into cracks. This evidence proved indisputable and decisive. At 3:15, Thomas moves packages with remains to his Toyota Hilux pickup. The phone was intentionally left at home to create a false geolocation picture. The Highway RP 225 camera recorded the vehicle at 5:12 in the morning. By 6 o'clock, the packages were buried in La Parva forest. Thomas returns home, after which he calmly proceeds to prepare morning soup. It was precisely this soup that caused the greatest shock in the courtroom. The laboratory confirmed traces of Carla's DNA on the ladle and in the pot. The court was never able to officially determine whether the family's children knew about the composition of this dish. The question remained without judicial proceedings. At the moment of announcing the final verdict, when the judge pronounces the formulation "particular cruelty," Thomas Ruiz loses control and shouts into the crowded courtroom, "No one will find her whole." He pronounces these words sharply and coldly, forcing everyone present to freeze in silence. The judge reacts to this calmly and dryly, only confirming that such statements only strengthen the established guilt and degree of cruelty of the committed crime. The court renders the final decision. Thomas Ruiz is sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of imprisonment of 25 years. After the judge's last phrase, the courtroom becomes quiet. The broadcast stops and the screen gradually darkens, symbolizing the end of the judicial process. The criminal case itself is immediately sent to the archive of the Criminal Court of Santiago, where it is assigned the final status of completed.